Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the Student Association for Fire Ecology Connections. Hereafter, I would like to say SAFE webinar series. My name is Badri Gimiri. I am a PhD candidate at Texas Tech University where I study plant-fire interaction. I also serve on a national SAFE leadership team and help coordinate this webinar series. Our goal with this series is to create a forum for students and early career fire ecologists to learn from and engage with a diverse group of professionals working across fire science and management. Before introducing today's speaker, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on SAFE website, typically within about a week. During the presentation, you might want to keep your microphone muted and your camera off. Following the presentation, we will have time for question and discussion. You are welcome to submit any question if you have using chat, or you may unmute and turn on your camera to ask your question directly during the discussion period. I will be moderating Q&A session. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Ashley Grupenhoff. Dr. Grupenhoff is an assistant professor of wildland fire management in the Department of Natural Resources Management and Environmental Sciences at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. Her research focuses on fire ecology, prescribed fire, fuel treatment effectiveness, and on-story plant responses to fire. Her work aims to improve understanding of how fire affects wildland ecosystems and to inform management strategies that help mitigate wildfire impacts. She combines field-based research with modeling approaches to examine how altered fire regimes influence species composition and ecosystem resilience across forest and shrubland ecosystems. I first became familiar with Dr. Grupenhoff's work a few years ago while reading research on fire interaction with California chaparral species in post-fire environment. And now we are excited to learn some more from her today. With that, it is my great pleasure to hand this floor over to Dr. Grupenhoff. Dr. Grupenhoff, thank you for being with us. And this floor is yours now.
Cool. Thank you, Badri, for such a warm welcome. I feel so honored to be here and talking to you all today. The title of my talk is Increasing Prescribed Fire Effectiveness through Workforce Development in California. But as Badri kind of stated, I'll talk a little bit about the research and then talk about kind of what we're doing to scale up and just kind of provide more opportunities for students in our program. So yeah, I'm an assistant professor of wildland fire management. So I teach a lot of the fire classes in our forestry department at Cal Poly SLO, and it's been really fun. We have an awesome unit down in San Luis Obispo, and it's been really great. This is a picture from a burn that we conducted on campus last fall, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. But just some background on me. My name is Ashley Grupenhoff. I got my PhD from UC Davis, and the focus of my research was all about changing fire regimes and fire management strategies in Chaparral and Sierra Nevada bioregion. But I'm actually not from California. I'm from Virginia originally, and I got my bachelor's over a decade ago at Virginia Commonwealth University. Fire wasn't really something that was talked about then in the university, and kind of was a journey to get here, and I've had a lot of amazing mentors along the way, trying to stay engaged in both the science and doing research, but also stay relevant and operational, because it's so important to kind of have both of those expertise. Something I'll talk about a little bit. My research interests, fire ecology. I feel like we're all here and we like talking about fire ecology, so that's no surprise. Prescribed fire, fuel treatment impacts, and post-fire recovery. So I'll get into that, but just want to talk a little bit about my professional timeline. I think this is something that's really helpful, especially with kind of early career and students and kind of understanding different paths, and not every path is linear. Mine sure wasn't, and I'm still a very baby tree. and I'm growing, and I have a lot of people that are helping me grow. But like I said, I started at Virginia Commonwealth University, and fire wasn't really talked about in a lot of the ecology classes that I took. So got really into birds and wildlife, and kind of that was this avenue I got into research and kind of understanding conservation questions. After I graduated, I kind of got the field tech bug and was a field biologist for Smithsonian and Institute for Bird Populations. So doing a lot of bird demography work in Ecuador, American Samoa, and that kind of landed me in California. It was really fun, great experience, and ended up in California and kind of started, this big light bulb moment of more landscape scale questions. So that led me to work for Nicole Molinari on for the U.S. Forest Service, the Los Padres, Angeles, San Bernardino, and Cleveland National Forests, and we did a lot of projects looking at the effects of fire on ecosystems and how to manage them. So that was kind of this big light bulb moment, and I just knew it just kind of questions that I cared so much about and knew was kind of where I wanted to head and had this dream of becoming an ecologist for an agency. Um, that kind of spurred, had some experiences on fires where I kind of realized this like divide between ologists and operational fire folks. And there was a lot of tension there. And I think probably a lot of us that are in this fire world probably pretty aware of that. And so that really pushed me to get more operational experience. And one of my main fire mentors, I think, is on here, Sasha Berleman. So got involved with the PBA up in the Good Fire Alliance, which was awesome way to kind of get exposed, Trex events, PBAs, get that early fire line experience. And then got some opportunities with the Nature Conservancy and the Forest Service to get more operational experience. And then kind of simultaneously was working on my PhD in fire ecology at UC Davis. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that I did during my PhD, as well as how that's expanding now, focused on fire ecology, gaining a better understanding of sampling design and modeling approaches to answer questions for managers. Now, I'm a assistant professor at Cal Poly SLO, and I feel like my job, I'm getting, like, I just am learning all the time and trying to build classes and provide that training to the next generation, as well as continue research, expanding that research into the Central Coast. So I just wanted to share this slide, like what does my job look like? I feel like everybody's jobs are a little bit different, and there's a lot. I teach. It's kind of like my primary job right now is teaching. So teach a lot of, and I'll talk about some of the fire classes and kind of the philosophy with teaching at Cal Poly, but I teach fire ecology, forest ecology, wildland fire management, prescribed fire class, wildland fire control, and it's really fun. I also read and write papers and try to stay relevant and know what's going on in the research world, write grants, measure fuels and vegetation. Now I'm more running more field crews that are collecting this data, but I think it's important to stay out there. Trying to stay involved with prescribed fire and I work a lot closely with the CAL FIRE unit here in SLU. Um, Analyze data. So we collect data, making sure, analyzing it and conducting correct statistical approaches and emails. I guess every job is like this, but so many emails. So getting that's kind of the reality of the job, and I feel really lucky to get paid to learn. So it's been a great job so far. What motivates me as a researcher and educator, first is working with diverse stakeholders to implement good fire and put good fire on the land. This is something that I think I was really inspired again, the Good Fire Alliance, really seeing these groups working so well with their local community to understand science and put good fire on the land is something that I was really inspired by and I want to continue to ingrain in my work. Provide empirical data to inform management decisions. And I'll talk about this a little bit, but is a huge need here in the Central Coast. We have really kind of diverse landscape with not a lot of research to support some of the kind of management strategies we're using. So kind of helping and working with the local tribe, with the CAL FIRE unit, with Forest Service to collect data and integrate students into that research to answer questions. And then training the next generation of fire ecologists and firelighters. This is a picture from our entry-level fire control class where we have a bunch of resources. You can see here, Cal State Parks was there. We have Forest Service, Cal Fire coming out and kind of networking with students early on. They get their kind of entry-level certifications in this early class, and it kind of helps them. And some of them are like, this is not for me. And some of them are really excited and then either get on a fire crew during the summer or get involved in research. So really great that they're kind of exposed to that early on in our program and then can kind of run with it or not. So I'll talk more about the teaching at the end. What do I love about my job? Community is a huge piece of this world. I'm just in the fire community itself. It is big, but it also feels very small. And there's just such amazing people that are, we all, I think, the learn by doing. And then always, always being a student of fire is just ingrained, I think, with most people in this field. And it makes for just such a yeah, growing and amazing community. This is a picture from our burn, and we have a student, CJ McLaughlin, who's been working with me in my lab and getting involved with Prescribed Fire on the left, and Kelly McFadden and Sarah Gibson from State Parks, who have been pivotal in kind of bringing their expertise to the classroom. We get to be outside. I love. Sometimes I answer my emails outside, still outside, but being outside collecting field data and being on burns, and then mentorship. Showing a picture here, these are two students that have been TAing with me for the fire control class, and Ella is in her fourth season on Helitac from ODF, and this is another student who was his first year, and they were in the same classes and they met up on a fire and sent me this picture. So it's really awesome to see these. Um, yeah, it like made my day. I kind of like cried when I got that email over the summer. Um, so I'm excited. That's like one of my favorite parts about this job. So I'm going to start this talk about research, talking about research pretty broadly, and just explain a little bit that I've been doing and some of our next projects. So if you're interested and want to get involved, and then I'll end with talking about some of the teaching. My overall research goal is pretty broad, but just mainly improve the effectiveness of fire management strategies in California landscapes. And this was kind of, I'll talk about how this started for me in a second, but I think I'm especially interested in this right now in the Central Coast, where we have a lot of these pretty novel and unique landscapes like Monterey pine and sage scrub. And I think our understanding of when and how and seasonality of burning is a big question right now. And this is really important right now, right? As we see this kind of push to increase prescribed fire use. Was noted in the California's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan, and we've seen a lot of policy pushes from Governor Newsom and to push that. And recently, the executive proclamation for increasing the pace and scale this past year, where I'll talk about how we actually applied and just got approved yesterday to do 9 more units on campus. So, really big push right now to increase prescribed fire use and cultural burning. And so, as we increase this pace and scale, it's super important for us to also making sure that we're incorporating research into that process. We're incorporating a lot of perspectives. We're talking to each other. We're relationship building to make sure that we're not only increasing good fire on the land, but then we're using the right kind of fire in the right place at the right time. So the scales of fire that I like to operate in to make sure that we kind of get there is kind of staying, again, understanding the operational world and staying involved in operations, statewide research, and I'll talk about lessons learned there, but increasing prescribed fire research as like adaptive management to help inform how we're using fire, and then synthesizing data across the Western US. So I love this kind of deck. Scott Stevens had this paper come out in 2021, Forest Restoration or Fuels Reduction, Convergent or Divergent, and really kind of, I think, beautifully placed what maybe a lot of us feel like we know, which is there's these kind of two categories of prescribed fire objectives. And we have mitigating future wildfire hazard by reducing surface fuel intensity and active crown fire spread. And then we have kind of improving ecosystem resilience, which is more at a larger scale, at a larger landscape scale, and more longer term. And so this is where we're thinking about restoring stand structure and composition, increasing biodiversity and wildlife habitat. And there's a really long list, but these are all kind of, we they're not the same. And fuel reduction per se does not equate to improved ecosystem resilience. And so making sure that we kind of address these trade-offs when we're applying prescribed fire is vital. So Cal Fire FRAP was really interested in this, and kind of right when I started my PhD, they came to Hugh Safford and the UC Davis Fire Lab and kind of were like, hey, would you help us start a statewide monitoring program? Because all of this prescribed fire is happening and we want to collect data. So that was our goal. And we basically just ran around finding, working with multiple collaborators, the Nature Conservancy, CAL FIRE, state parks, Forest Service, Fire Forward, Save the Redwoods to conduct research and just start to monitor some of these burns. We were prioritizing yellow pine and mixed conifer forest early on in the program, starting in 2019. But then I remember in 2020, I looked at a map of where burning was happening, and it was just so concentrated to PBAs in the North Coast, the Good Fire Alliance being one of them. And that was kind of this time we were like, okay, we should start expanding to coast redwood and mixed evergreen. As you might expect, though, it kind of got a little unwildly because we just had so many different ecosystem types and so many different locations and one crew. And we were just running around trying to collect data during and after, immediately after, and right before all of these burns. So it got pretty hectic, but we do have an amazing data set. And a main lesson learned from that is we can't rely on one crew to do statewide monitoring. It needs to be more localized. And so now, from that lesson learned, we have these hubs. So Chico is one hub that's prioritizing research in kind of the foothill woodlands and mixed conifer in the northern Sierra Nevada. We have Berkeley that's working, expanding and continuing this research from this plot network. We have not we, Cal Fire, Cal Fire is organizing this, not me, but Kate Wilkin is up at San Jose State, focusing more on kind of coastal prairie, and my lab will be starting up prioritizing kind of the central coast, oak woodlands, Monterey pine, and shrubland. So that was a big lesson learned, and I need to make sure I don't get off track here. So just wanted to talk a little bit. We basically compiled this data from yellow pine and mixed conifer forests. We had 19 project sites that burned, over 700 plots implemented between a 4-year period. So a lot of data, and was really great to have this kind of having a lot of sites, as it's not really that common in, aside from the fire and fire surrogates studies. It's really nice to have multiple sites so that we can kind of really understand these general trends in whether prescribed fire is effective and how it's effective. And so, probably not surprisingly, from our data set, we found that prescribed fire successfully reduced fuels. And this level was below the NRV, the natural range of variation, for up to 2 years post-fire. This gray bar in we're looking at different fuel categories. Fine, I just compiled fine together, coarse woody fuels, litter, and duff. That pre-fire is designated in the tan, and we can see that kind of right above that natural range of variation value. The dotted line is looking at that mean, and then the range is in the gray. These values that I got are compiled from Scott and Stevens, that did kind of overview of of the all of the studies conducted that looked at either contemporary or reference stands for yellow pine mixed conifer, and then a few studies that were added. Derek Young did a really great compilation of a bunch of studies in this forest type to look at not only, yeah, to basically compile all of woody fuels, stand density, shrub cover, all of that. So use that. And I will say, just keep an eye out because Derek is updating these natural range of variation values and has a really cool framework that he was talking about in a meeting last week. So putting a plug in to look at his work and watch out for that paper. But yes, we see service fuels are reduced. That's great. That's what we want. It's below NRV, and we see that holding true for up to 2 years. Looking at stand structure, we saw greatest effects on surface fuels, but honestly, a pretty limited effect in altering forest structure, which for a single entry burn is kind of what we'd expect. We're looking at diameter size class here of all of our trees. We looked at tree density, basal area across different species, and where did we see most of our reduction? It was smaller diameter trees and also more shade tolerant species. So a lot, big reduction of these kind of less than 40 centimeter DBH trees, which is what we want, right? We want to kind of start thinning out a lot of our high density forests and increasing composition towards more quercus, black oak and pines. And so we're seeing this, but you can see here this red bar designated the NRV values. So we're still extremely above this. So single entry burns across the Sierra Nevada right now are not accomplishing this. And this is something that we know pretty well. The combination of thinning and burning is a necessary management strategy. And multiple entry burns may be necessary to induce more structural change. So how do these, I have more data and I'm not going to talk about it today, but happy to answer questions. Just wanted to talk about how these findings might scale across a broader spatial area. So worked with some colleagues, Derek Young and Andrew Latimer, to basically compile and all studies that were looking at any treatments conducted in dry conifer forests, looking at fuel dynamics. So thin, burn, thin plus burn. We compiled any fuels treatments. That was our original purpose, and we found we didn't have enough of other treatments aside from those three categories to do an adequate analysis. But I'll show you some of our kind of lessons learned from that. And we had 65 published papers and 95 distinct studies that we included in this analysis. And there's been quite a few experiments that have provided invaluable info on fuel dynamics, for example, the fire and fire surrogate study. But this is the first one that compiles a more broader broader amount of published studies. So we had a lot more forest types and just a wider array of kind of sites that we could include in our analysis. So I'm just showing you a map of all the points that we included. So looking across basically the entire west here. And sorry, that I didn't want to show you 1 million figures for the sake of time, but overall we found thinning and burn, the things that we know a lot about, right? Thinning and burning had greatest effect on reducing overstory fuels, but burn only was actually the most successful treatment in reducing fine and coarse woody debris, not the thin and burn. So we have this pulse of fuel loading after thinning treatments that is being reduced in the burn. So we kind of have a neutral effect on surface fuel loading, but burn only was the most successful in reducing both fine and coarse woody fuels, even after that single entry. So it's I think that's the main finding to take away. And we looked at take a look at that paper if you're interested. We looked at a bunch of starting fuel conditions and how effectiveness varies across starting conditions as well as individual forest type. And the key thing I like to talk about this paper is just showing where our gaps are. So this figure to the left is just looking at all of the studies that fit kind of in our literature review. And as you might expect, a lot of studies in Sierra mixed conifer and yellow pine. And we see not as much work, especially pine oak and Klamath mixed evergreen. Really, we need a lot more work there, and Rocky Mountain mixed conifer as well. We also looked at different treatment types, and you can see here circled, right? Prescribed burn, thin, and thin post burn, pretty widely studied. We have a lot that we can work with here, but we don't have a lot of multiple entry. This is kind of what are the dynamics after multiple entry burns? What about the interaction between mastication and fire? And here I'm showing This is a crushing treatment, and this is something I'll talk about in one of a study I'm starting up because that's a really common field management strategy used here in San Luis Obispo is crushing brush and burning it. So we have a need for other types too. So this is a push for anybody who's maybe thinking about grad school to fill in these gaps. Um, we also, and this is probably not surprising either, a few studies looking at treatment longevity. So only 6% looking at fuel loads after over 20 years. So kind of a need for more longer term monitoring to assess, you know, what are, we have an idea and we can understand the fire regime of a certain place and in certain ecology to understand the ideal interval, but having more data as we have kind of future climate change impacting our forests, we have a lot of interactions with drought and climate. It's important for us to continue long-term monitoring to make sure we're adapting our management strategies accordingly. So with all of that, I am starting up some work here on the Central Coast, as I alluded to, prescribed and cultural fire research, working with the Yaktichu Tichu Northern Chumash tribe, who did their first cultural burn in the county at Johnson Ranch. I think that was 2 years ago. And so they have been scaling up some of their fire use and are really wanting to work with students. CAL FIRE unit has been doing a lot. The Nature Conservancy, Forest Service, and state parks. So the goal here is that we increase our understanding in oak woodland, sage scrub, interior Shami chaparral, Monterey pine, and then also kind of continue that time temporal component as well. And this kind of leads to some other previous work that I don't want to spend too much time on, but I also, as Badri alluded to, I've done a lot of work in chaparral, and we did a paper looking at the impacts of short interval fire on chaparral resilience, and this was a project that was near Berryessa, up right outside Davis, California. This is if you look at a FRID map, this is the most highly departed area in the whole state, meaning it's the most, has been having way more fire than it historically did. And we went out to look and collect data on a bunch of diversity metrics as well as regeneration, looking at our obligate seedings, our obligate seeders, our shrub species that need to grow to maturity to put seed in the seed bank. And these species get hit pretty hard when there's frequent fire. Why? Because fire occurs before they can grow large enough to put seed in the seed bank. So this is kind of our species of concern when we're thinking about short interval fires and the increase in more chaparral systems. And the outcome there is we see this type conversion to non-native grassland that is one has a reduction in overall species diversity, but it also leads to grass fire cycle where we see increase in probability of ignition and an increase in these systems can burn for a wider time during the year. So previous work we were looking at this and kind of found this 3 short interval fires was this kind of key mark where we saw complete extirpation of our obligate cedars and a reduction in dominance of native species to non-native grassland. And so now kind of taking the prescribed fire work and that work and trying to increase our understanding in Central California. So the role of fuel treatments are being used quite wild a lot right now, a lot of crushing and burning treatments. And so just working closely, the CAL FIRE actually reached out and wanted to work together to create good control units. And so we're setting up a whole program to really understand the impacts of these treatments and when to best use them in Central California. Here, just showing a picture. So Cal Poly, we're really undergraduate focused. Our research is run and by undergraduates. Here we have undergraduate research, CJ McLaughlin. He's actually the president of our SAFE club now. And then ENVM graduate student Ina McKinney, who finished up last fall. And then CAL FIRE environmental scientist Brandon Sanderson, who I've been working closely with. So they did a study last summer looking at just the impacts of seasonality, but we're hoping to increase this work over the next few years. And our main goal is this is out with CAL FIRE. This is kind of the classic scenario where they're kind of crushing. They'll let it cure for a year or two and then burn in early spring or late fall. understand this trade-off between fuel reduction and ecological impacts, and understanding that in some places we may need to use these treatments because it makes it easier for operations, right? We have these systems in the wild and urban interface, and it makes it easier. It's a lot easier to walk through grass than it is through shrubs. So there is, but do we need to be doing these treatments when they're far from homes? Probably not. So working together to kind of create one, understand first, collect data. I think data tells 1,000 words. Provide that empirical data, and then use that to inform landscape scale decisions that are geared towards the Central Coast and not data from, more xeric Southern California or higher productivity Northern California, but is more local. So also doing research on what happens when we don't treat fuels. So working with UC Davis and the California Air Resource Board on this delayed forest reestablishment project will be starting this year. And this is, so CARB is doing a lot of work with their quantitative methodology. So what is the greenhouse gas emission? What is the cost if we don't treat our forests, if we don't treat some of this land and we see type conversion to different systems? So in this case, this is a picture that is from Derek Young, a collaborator on this project, where we see these really higher intensity, higher extent fires in our beloved mixed conifer forests and type conversion to shrubland systems. So we're trying to see, okay, right now, CARB assumes there's going to be no recovery over time, which is maybe not a great assumption. Maybe that's true, and we see complete type conversion to shrubland, and soon the United States Forest Service will be the shrubland service. But in some cases, we do see recovery. And where is that? And what are the ecological factors that drive that? And then if we don't, what is the carbon cost of that type conversion to total shrub? So I love shrubs in some places, but not in all places. So that's one of our other projects that I'm really excited about. But now I'm going to pivot to teaching for this kind of last 15 minutes, and then hopefully we have time for questions. This is this is a main goal of my work at Cal Poly right now, and it's something that I've been really loving and enjoying. Um, this is CJ again. He's a rock star. This is a project that we're doing with the Los Padres out on near Ojai. There's this really cool relic ponderosa pine stand that all burned in the Thomas Fire. Anyway, teaching. My goal is to build a more inclusive learning environment for in fire. So kind of the goals that I've been trying to think about and talk with, we're having a lot of conversations is how to create more live training with deeper learning on fire ecology, policy, and social dynamics, create live fire opportunities. And we have really a lot of support from our local fire agencies. So Cal Fire, Forest Service, state parks have been vital for making that happen. Internships and professional development, trying to provide more opportunities for students to meet a really diverse set of people who have taken different paths. And so that can be helpful and inspiring to understand, what paths there are, what to do, how to get there. So diverse speakers, the Waititi Northern Chumash. Luckily, we have some great Indigenous classes of ethnicity and land and Fire and Society that are actually taught by Becca Lucas, who's a Waititi Northern Chumash member. So it's great the students are taking classes with her. But also Sierra Pacific Industries and the incorporation of industry and timber into these conversations, Cal Fire, Forest Service, and state parks. Um, Fire, and I'm like, this is also not new news, but fire is pretty white and pretty male. And so that's our student body. That's like just making sure that there's other people that our students are seeing, and it's been really great, especially state parks. We've had a lot of state parks, amazing women leadership be involved in our operational classes, and there have been women in my classes who have historically just been like, well, that's not a career that I'm going to get in. And just seeing kind of women that come out and are leaders has been super huge for them. And I've seen kind of this shift in people just being more inspired. So that's been a huge part that I'm hoping to bring is more underrepresented voices in the fire world. Intro class, we have this Wildland fire control class, and it's kind of 10 weeks of basic fire training. And again, this is kind of a way that I found students get to network with amazing groups. So we start off and they do handline construction and fire shelter deployment. We have the Royal Grande hotshots come out, so they get exposed to kind of life in a day. We have wander handling and using firing devices with a bunch of different agencies, Forest Service, Cal Fire, and state parks. And this is kind of their entry fire class. We're also in the classroom learning about fire physics and kind of doing 190, 180, all of this stuff. They're also getting exposed to radios and just communication and decision making in this early class. And this really sets them up for future classes. So kind of we have a bunch of other fire classes, fire ecology, for example, but just wanted to end talking about this class, which is our prescribed fire senior project class. Offered this for the first time in the fall, and it was kind of a tester to see how it would go. The prereqs for this class were that class I just talked about, wild and fire control, and then fire ecology. So the goal here is that they kind of have been exposed to what it means to, be safe on fire and also understand fire ecology and the nuance of different how fire is useful in different ecosystems. And this project, again, senior level targeted study of prescribed fire concepts and practice. We provide hands-on learning opportunities designed to prepare them for the application of fire. So, kind of two main goals is understanding the science. So, understanding how to read papers and distill information and read about research on prescribed fire science and do a literature review. They all dive into a certain topic that they're interested in. We had some soils majors, and so they were kind of interested in the effects of fire on soils. We had folks interested in smoke, folks interested in wildlife, and so they all get to kind of get this question, create a question, and dive into the literature, which we just don't have enough time to go into detail for every topic, right? So great experience. We talk about how and when to use prescribed fire in California, the trade-offs there, and they get exposed to fire modeling. So hey, flame map, IFTDIS, there's a comma there, but those are the three that we've been doing so far. It's only a 10-week class, so it's kind of hard to cover all the things. And then a key thing here is the operation. So giving them fire line experience and then walking through the steps of planning, mapping, and permitting. And we have an advisory council, and something that always comes up is the importance of communication. They're like, students are great, but then they come and they can't communicate. So I've been trying to ingrain that more into classes. So practicing with radios. I wish I had more of that practice early on. And briefing. So having, just in low stakes environments, giving them more leadership and opportunity to practice that leadership so that they're ready to go in the workplace. We conducted this first burn last fall on campus. Super huge. It was a 2-year process to get this to happen, just to get buy-in from the university, to get the permitting all good, and was super successful. It was 30 acres of grass, so pretty low complexity, but we had 25 students that were trained leading up to the event. And then we're in 4 squads where they worked side by side with a CAL FIRE or state parks firing boss and got to actually like put fire on the ground, and they did this burn. We had resources come from Forest Service and CAL FIRE, and we had even our ag ops and animal science department brought out a lot of their equipment. We got a lot of buy-in to get our own equipment to conduct this. So a lot of support for this, and I think just goes to show how much our local agency cares about teaching the next generation, because they're like, these are the people that we want working with us. So had a lot of buy-in and got this pulled off. Then it also provided a lot of opportunities for classes. So there was a soils class that actually used their lab. Like they went in for one of the soils classes. They went in before and after and collected data for one of their labs. And there was a wildlife class that came out. So really cool to see this kind of, this was pretty, as you know, probably a lot of people know, just like pulling off these burns is a lot of work. So I just hope that this becomes more streamlined so we can get more research and more people involved in the process. This went well, and the university is super supportive. And so I think they have had more buy-in and are more down to allow this to happen in the future, which is really great. I think I already said this in the last slide, but super is really not possible without engagement from local agencies and community. CAL FIRE and state parks were huge. Sarah Gibson from State Parks drove down and was the burn boss actual California State. She was burn boss actual on the burn. And you can see this picture on the top. Just I love this picture because it really shows all the different people out there. You can see Kenny in the back. He was out there. He's in ag ops on campus and brought out his dozer and was staged just ready to go and was so excited about it. We had Cal Fire, again, State Parks Enforcer. So was great, and not possible without those people. And now we're building momentum with the EP, this EPP. So last year, Governor Newsom issued a statewide fuels reduction environmental protection plan. That's what EPP stands for. That was an emergency proclamation to increase the pace and scale of more wildfire projects. So we just yesterday actually got approved for 9 units on campus that you can kind of see here. I have an arrow just showing where campus is. We own a lot of areas here that I'm circling. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but bunch of rangeland here, Escuela Ranch. So I think a great way to increase, just provide opportunities for our students to get some training, and also increase some research that's easy for us to just, it's close by. We can engage a lot of faculty, we can engage a lot of classes and students into, and we don't have to kind of go very, very far. Um, so the future of fire management in California's diverse landscapes. Super important science-driven perspectives in fire management. Some kind of just ending thoughts that I have. Studying the role of fire in the past is super important and kind of something I'm focusing on here on the Central Coast and working with a lot of researchers that have been in the system for a while. And also understanding what that looks like with future climate change. I think somebody had a question about that. And I think Frank Davis has been doing a lot of work of projecting the kind of ranges of a lot of oaks and big coned oak fir and a lot of species with future climate change. So it's super vital that we start to think about how we manage these landscapes in the future. And I will be honest, I don't have a clear understanding of that right now and hope that we can kind of work together as a community to figure that out. Especially, I think when talking about future range of variation, understanding that the interactions, right, are going to get more intense. So we're going to have more drought. We're going to have more insect mortality, and that's going to be interacting with fire. We're going to have more extreme fire. And so it's kind of hard to predict what we might see. And so, yeah, again, working together to figure that out. Incorporating Indigenous perspectives, it's super key for research and for teaching, and we need to work together. And like I said before, the Waititi Northern Chumash Tribe is doing a lot of great work in San Luis Obispo, and just working with them and trying to understand what they need to get what they're doing done. And then increase our effectiveness of current management strategies as an adaptive management framework, training the next generation of fire ecologists, and informing public and government. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Thank you for taking your time out of your afternoon to come listen. Yeah, please reach out. My email is here. I'm happy to talk about anything and everything. This work really, so many people to put on here, but I just wanted to highlight some of the people that have been super vital for my work here in San Luis Obispo. Dave Erickson and Luke Borgo from the CAL FIRE unit, as well as Brandon Sanderson, sorry. Sarah Gibson and Kelly McFadden, Jeremy James, Aaron and Elizabeth with TNC, and then the Fire Ecology Lab.